Her parents gave her golden boy brother a Tesla, then blamed her when he wrecked it, so she decided to step in. Her mom said she was being dramatic. But honestly, drama is the only thing this family ever gives her. Julia Turner isn't hard to please. She doesn't complain, doesn't seek attention, and definitely doesn't expect praise just for doing the right thing. But some days, even patience gets tired, especially when it keeps getting stepped on by the same pair of shoes. The ones worn by the child everyone calls the special one. Julia is 26. She works at a mid-sized architecture firm in Atlanta and lives in a tidy apartment exactly 17 minutes from the office. She's paid her own way since she was 22. No loans, no handouts. Her dinners are usually homemade salads, sometimes with a light beer and an old movie replaying on Netflix. She doesn't call it success, just normal, a quiet kind of adulthood. The Turner family is different. They live in Marietta, a northern suburb of the city. A two-story house with a gray roof, white picket fence, and a lawn trimmed like a golf course. Everything looks perfect, unless you notice the way they look at Julia and the way they look at Ethan. Ethan Turner, 27. No steady job, dropped out of college junior year because it didn't fit his vibe. Tried podcasting for 3 months, then quit. Drove Uber for a few weeks, but said it was too stressful. Lately, he claims he's doing drop shipping, though no one's ever seen a single order. Still, their parents call him someone who's finding his path. And Julia, too cold, too rigid, doesn't know how to adapt in life. Things came to a head on Ethan's birthday afternoon. A full-blown backyard party was thrown, with catered Italian food, a small jazz band, and even a sign that read, "Congratulations, Ethan. Here's to the next chapter." Julia drove over in silence, a bottle of red wine in the passenger seat, a gift for her brother, even though she knew he might not bother to look at it. She didn't want to go, but saying no would have just made her the one who never tries for family. The party started at 5 p.m. By 5:23, her parents unveiled the main gift, a white Tesla Model 3 parked in the corner of the yard. Ethan screamed, ran over, and hugged them. People filmed, clapped. Julia stood back, still holding a soda she hadn't touched. Her mom turned to her. "You should learn to be happy for others." Julia pressed her lips together. 3 months ago, on her 26th birthday, her mom had simply texted, "Save your money and grow up." The party carried on with laughter and group photos. Except for Julia. No one asked if she was okay. At 6:12, she left. No goodbyes. That night, she wrote a single line in her journal, "This is the last time I go home." But it wasn't the first time Julia had been treated like an extra. Years ago, Ethan once street raced through their neighborhood and nearly hit a group of kids playing on a front lawn. They called it a minor mistake and said he was still learning control. Julia was told, "Don't blow things out of proportion." Another time, Ethan wrecked the backyard sprinkler system because he wanted to teach himself mechanics. When the neighbors complained, her parents texted, "Talk to your brother. You're the only one he listens to." Julia never forgot how that felt. Like she was the unpaid babysitter for an overgrown child, handed responsibility for things she had nothing to do with. She once tried to talk about it. Just once, at 24, she asked her mom, "Why is every mistake Ethan makes somehow my problem?" Her mom answered casually, "Because you're more reasonable. You should help him change." That was the day Julia learned the biggest lesson of all. In this family, logic never beats favoritism. She didn't hate Ethan, at least not in any personal way. Ethan was simply living up to the expectations their parents had planted in him, the warped belief that everything will be fine as long as the sun is the center of it all. If there was anyone to be mad at, Julia knew exactly who deserved it. And when the Tesla showed up, a new monument to the same old favoritism, Julia knew the truth was plain. She had no reason left to keep playing background in a story where she'd never be cast as the lead. 3 weeks after that birthday party, it rained lightly, not enough to soak anyone, but enough to make everything feel heavier. Ethan left a party with some old friends in Sandy Springs and drove the Tesla straight into a light pole outside a closed-down pizza shop. When the cops arrived, he wasn't badly hurt. Airbags deployed. The smell of alcohol still hung in the air. But there was no breathalyzer test, no official report. The next morning, there was nothing on the local news, no posts on Nextdoor, No one outside the inner circle even mentioned the crash. Julia found out through a text from her grandmother. Ethan's car was hit last night. Your parents handled it. She called, not because she cared about the car, but because some part of her still cared about the person in it. Is he okay? Julia asked. On the other end, her mom sighed. If you hadn't stressed him out like the other day, this probably wouldn't have happened. That line didn't hit Julia like a punch. It hit like a rerun. A soundtrack she'd heard so many times she knew every note. She hung up, didn't say another word. No yelling, no tears, just sent one message. I'm not responsible for the choices of grown adults. And then she disappeared off the radar. No texts, no calls. She didn't return any missed calls from home. Blocked the family group chat on Messenger. Turned off the last seen status on iMessage. The only things still running were her work email and a wordless music playlist on Spotify. 3 days passed. No one checked in. No one sent a single message to see if she was alive or dead. Not one person in the family reached out. Not even her grandmother, who used to send memes at 10 p.m. Julia wasn't surprised. She just wrote one line in her paper journal. The only place she never stores anything digitally. Their silence is louder than anything they could have said. Wednesday morning, she woke up like usual. Made coffee, scheduled a meeting with the interiors team. Everything felt normal, so normal it felt fake. When she opened her banking app to transfer rent, she accidentally tapped on a secondary account, the shared family account she'd once been in charge of back in college, still listed under linked accounts. One click. She opened the transaction history. A stream of withdrawals popped up, not once or twice, dozens of times. None of the amounts were big enough to raise alarms on their own, but added together they totaled enough to buy a Tesla. The recipient name was familiar. Ethan Turner. The notes were vague: emergency cash, startup fund, medical expense. But Ethan was never sick. And what startup? Julia started taking screenshots. Every transaction. Dates, amounts, notes. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, but her instincts told her this was a pattern, not an accident. Not a one-time mistake. A covered-up chain of them. One transaction from last July matched the time Ethan told their mom he needed a loan to build a dating app. Another, from March, tax deduction for donation, but the money went straight to Ethan's card. Julia's hand trembled slightly, not from shock, but from the clarity of a new realization settling in. This wasn't just favoritism, this was financial abuse. Within the family, she opened her laptop, created a new folder on her desktop, Tesla, full trail. Dragged each screenshot in, renamed every file by date, logged each entry into an Excel sheet. No more background music, no more Netflix, no more hoping someone would explain, just silence. And a woman piecing together evidence, not for revenge, but to reclaim the truth they always refused to admit. No one stood beside Julia now, only a blinking cursor on the screen and a row of folders, coldly labeled like the way she'd been treated for over 20 years. She sat there quietly cross-referencing every line. Column A, transaction date. Column B, recipient. Column C, amount. Column D, note. Column E, the lie it covered. She counted again. $143,285, the total Ethan had withdrawn from the shared account over 5 years. Not including cash handed over, not including gifts, and not including the opportunity cost she lost if that money had been invested or used for her. The largest transaction? $48,000. Note read, donation support, community vehicle program. She didn't need to guess. That was the Tesla Model 3. And the community they claimed to serve clearly had only one member. Julia traced the trail further, through digital tax records stored in a shared family drive folder, something her mom had once set up so everyone could review finances transparently. The tax filings matched the donation entry. Her parents had written off part of their income taxes by claiming the car expense as a charitable contribution to a fake program. She wasn't an accountant, but she was smart enough to know this was misrepresentation, a false report of fund use, and if anyone ever asked, she wouldn't hesitate to tell the truth. Her fingers kept moving across the keyboard, but something inside her slowed. Not because of the money, because of the name in every line. Ethan Turner. The kid who once built Lego cities with her, who used to share the backseat on school runs, who once called her big sis for real, even though she was younger by a year. And now, He was the one riding high on a justice she had to build from scratch. Julia leaned back in her chair. A memory from when she was 17 rushed in. She'd been a straight-A student with near-perfect SAT scores. Her dream was Yale, not for the name, but because their sustainable design program was the best in the country. But her mother said, "You should pick Georgia Tech. It's closer, it's cheaper. Save the money so Ethan still has a shot." She stayed silent, and they took her silence as consent. Every time she stepped aside, every dream she shelved had become thousands of dollars rolling under Ethan's Tesla tires. And something inside her, finally, fully snapped. She compiled everything into one master folder. Turner records, compressed the files, set a password, sent it to the email, marsha.keller@bklfirm.com. Subject line, "Need legal eyes, possible misuse of family trust." Aunt Marcia replied in 22 minutes. "You're not alone, and this isn't just family business anymore. It's legal." Marcia was her mother's younger sister, the one who once helped Julia cancel a lease when her previous landlord tried to withhold her deposit. The one who had said, without a trace of doubt, "In this family, I might be the only one who's ever treated you like an adult." She read Marcia's email 3 times, then opened another tab, composed a new message, to ethan.turner998x@gmail.com. Subject, "Time's up. Read it carefully. No note, no explanation, just a PDF, every transaction, bank code, and a Google Drive link to the full evidence folder. No warning, no emotion. Just the truth, raw and non-negotiable." The reply came in under an hour. "Who do you think you are? I'm the son in this family." Julia stared at the words like they were written in the leftover ink of a lifetime of arrogance. She typed back just one line, "Which is exactly why you've never had to be accountable." Then she shut the laptop. No waiting. No need for a response. Everything that needed saying was said. Everything that needed proving sat in a time-stamped file. From now on, silence wouldn't be what hurt her. It would be her weapon. A soft ping landed in her inbox on Monday morning. Julia glanced at her phone while making coffee, expecting nothing but work emails. But the sender's name caught her eye. Marcia. The subject line was short, "Update from IRS." She opened it. It's official. The IRS has launched an investigation into misreported expenditures from the Turner Family Trust. They're starting with the most recent fiscal year but may expand if a pattern of misuse is found. No exclamation marks, no sympathy, just the facts. And facts at this point didn't need dressing up. Less than an hour later, her phone buzzed. A call from her mother. Julia didn't have to guess the content. She let it ring once, twice, then picked up. "No hi, honey. No how are you?" Just a voice, already cracking from rage. "Are you trying to destroy this family?" Julia stood still in the kitchen, coffee cup warm in her hand. Her voice came out calm, cold even. "I'm not destroying anything. I just stopped pretending everything's fine." There was a pause on the other end. Then her mother's voice spiked again. "You don't understand the consequences. What will people think when they hear you went after your own family?" Julia cut in. No shouting, just sharp enough to draw blood. "I didn't go after anyone. What you all did speaks for itself." She hung up. Didn't wait for a reply. This time, the silence was intentional. This time, it belonged to her. 3 days later, Ethan was called in to meet with legal representatives. This wasn't a kitchen table chat. It was formal, recorded, lawyer present, paperwork on the table, signatures required. For the first time in his life, he couldn't deflect. No mom to cover, no dad to shield him. Just Ethan, and the responsibility he'd never had to carry. Word started to leak. Secrets like this don't stay buried. The company where her father worked as head accountant received a formal notice. Temporary suspension pending investigation. Not fired, not yet, but flagged. Their finance department couldn't justify keeping someone linked to tax fraud on the books. Julia heard it from an old friend who worked in HR there. She didn't press for details. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel guilty. Everyone was facing the consequences of their own decisions, not hers. She still went to work, still showed up on time, still grabbed her usual coffee from the corner shop on Peachtree. But her eyes were different now. No longer the look of someone enduring, trying to seem okay. Now, she looked like someone who'd learned not to apologize for being clear-headed. Friday lunch, the whole team went out. As they sat down, her best friend Serena leaned over and asked quietly, "Do you feel lighter now?" Julia stared at her glass for a second, then answered plainly, "Not exactly, but at least I stopped letting them write my story for me." She didn't need to feel victorious. She just needed the right to reclaim the part of her life that had been twisted for too long by people who never earned the power they took. That same afternoon, Marcia sent another brief message. IRS is digging deeper. Ethan suspected of misusing business loans from the family trust, falsely listing the type of startup. Julia didn't ask for details, but she already knew. It was the so-called dating app Ethan once claimed he'd invested in. In reality, the money had gone to credit card debt and gaming equipment. The following Monday, Marcia forwarded an internal IRS document. Ethan had been served a formal restitution agreement, backed by legal enforcement. If he failed to repay on time, he'd face potential misdemeanor prosecution. And for the first time, Ethan had no one shielding him. No mother, voice shaking, whispering, "He just needs more time." No father bargaining, "I'll cover it, as long as it doesn't go on his record." There was only his name, Ethan James Turner, beneath a financial liability agreement, in a space where the law no longer allowed son to stand in for responsibility. Julia received that email while walking home. She stopped at a pedestrian overpass, watching the traffic flow beneath her. Every car moving forward. She unlocked her phone, didn't text anyone, just saved that final PDF into the folder. Tesla, full trail. Not to brag, not for revenge, just to remember. Truth, once brought into the light, doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. The truth had come out, the paperwork had been signed, and accountability had finally landed where it belonged. But what Julia didn't expect was what remained after everything. Silence. Thick, stubborn, no apology, no acknowledgement, not a single message, not one call. The Turner family, instead of facing the fallout, retreated into the space they knew best. Denial. Julia wasn't surprised. She didn't reach out either. Everything that needed saying, she'd said. Everything that needed doing, she'd done. And if they needed time to understand what happened, that was time she no longer owed them. 1 week, then 2, then 3. She kept going to work, kept living her normal life, but every now and then, her eyes flicked across her phone screen, where there were still no notifications from anyone named Turner. Then one Wednesday evening, while cleaning up her inbox, a call came in. Private number. Julia hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. The voice on the other end was old, steady, clear, unmistakable. "It's me, Helen." Julia said nothing. Her grandmother continued, "I've heard all of it." "Still no. How are you, sweetheart?" "No, I'm sorry for what your mother did. Just one slow sentence. Your mother was wrong, but I know she'll never admit it." Silence stretched. Julia wasn't sure what to say. Then her grandmother spoke again, not waiting for a response. "When your mother gave birth to you, I was at the hospital. I remember it clearly. She looked at you for the first time, then turned away and cried. Not from emotion, but because she said, 'I don't know how to love another one.'" It landed like a dull knife, not sharp, but deep. Julia rose from her chair and walked to the window, staring out at the quiet city lights. She didn't cry, she just asked, "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think you need to know. Not everything that's happened in your life is your fault. Some absences have nothing to do with how good you are. They exist because others never had enough in them to give." Julia took a breath, long, deep, then said, "I don't need love they don't have. I need justice." There was a pause. Then her grandmother answered, softly, "You did the right thing, and sometimes right is all you've got." The call ended not long after. No long goodbyes, no emotional clinging. But it left something heavy and quiet in Julia's chest. Not sadness, not anger. Just a final confirmation. She wasn't crazy, she wasn't overreacting. She was just the only one willing to open her eyes. That night, Julia opened her laptop, but instead of clicking into spreadsheets or emails, she opened a blank Word document. The first line, "This isn't a memoir. It's a ledger of everything I had to swallow just to keep the peace." She didn't know what it would become. A book, an essay, maybe just a file she'd print and tuck away. But she knew this. She needed to write. Not to tell the story, but to close it. To finally fold shut the chapter others had always tried to write for her. The next morning, she cleaned out her inbox, deleted every message labeled Mom, Dad, Ethan, opened her photo gallery, erased every family picture, from birthday snapshots to graduation group shots. She walked into a phone store, bought a new SIM card, registered a number no one knew, a quiet kind of rebirth, no cake, no congratulations. On a late fall afternoon, with the air soft and the breeze just enough to lift her hair, she stepped into the admissions office at Emory Law School, submitted her application, papers in order, resume sharp, personal statement written in the clearest, calmest night of her life. In the box labeled Career Objective, she wrote, "Future in Family Justice." No complaints, no dramatics, just one thing, a belief that if justice doesn't exist in the home, then it must be learned, so others won't grow up not knowing what they deserve. On her first day at Emory Law School, the professor walked into the room, set his bag on the desk, and skipped all small talk. He looked around the room and asked bluntly, "Why did you choose law?" The class fell silent for a few seconds. A few hands went up, the usual answers followed, to help the vulnerable. "I was inspired by a famous case, to change the system." Julia sat in the third row. She hadn't planned to speak, but the professor looked straight at her, brow raised, waiting. She stood. Her voice was calm, steady, without hesitation. "Because I grew up in a family where the truth was always distorted." No one in the class understood the full weight of her words, but no one asked, because Julia's eyes, direct, steady, unflinching, said everything. It wasn't a story with a happy ending, but it was reason enough to become fuel. After class, the girl sitting next to her turned and asked, "Aren't you angry? I mean, at your family?" Julia shook her head. Anger is a form of punishment. Justice is cleaner, more final. It wasn't philosophy. It was how she lived, what she'd learned through every time she was sidelined, blamed, left alone. Through every late night spent compiling evidence, not to prove she was perfect, but to prove she wasn't crazy, wasn't overreacting, and wasn't the problem. The semester flew by. Civil law, legal ethics, and most of all, advocacy class, where Julia discovered this simple, cutting truth. When delivered the right way, truth can save people, or at least save part of their life. At the end of her first term, the class was given a major assignment: rewrite a personal experience as a formal legal argument, complete with analysis, structured reasoning, and a clear moral position. Julia didn't hesitate long. She wasn't going to write about the Tesla, at least not exactly. She changed the names, changed the setting, turned the Tesla into a disputed inheritance, turned Ethan into a cousin, turned Julia into a woman no one saw until they had no choice but to see her as her own attorney. But the truth still pulsed beneath the fictional skin. The numbers, the behaviors, the excuses, peeled back layer by layer like an onion until only the raw core remained: emotional manipulation and the evasion of accountability. Her paper ran longer than the word limit. Julia didn't apologize. When she turned it in, the professor asked only one question: "Based on a true story?" She nodded. No explanation needed. A week later, he returned the paper with handwritten comments. Cold, precise, relentless, but deeply humane. She took the paper, folded it neatly, didn't show it to anyone, didn't send it to friends, didn't post it online. She brought it home and placed it in her desk drawer beside the half-finished journal. That night, under the glow of her desk lamp, Julia opened the journal and wrote, "This isn't revenge. It's just the justice they were always missing, returned to its rightful place." She put the pen down, didn't feel weighed down, didn't feel entirely light either. But she felt something clear and steady. She was living a life that was real, no longer playing a part in someone else's script. The next day, after her final class of the semester, Julia stepped outside. A light rain was falling, scattered drops tapping the sidewalk. She didn't rush for cover, didn't open an umbrella. For the first time in years, the rain didn't make her feel cold. It just let her know. Her heart, finally, was quiet. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with the bang of a gavel. It comes in the quiet resolve of someone who was cast in the wrong role and finally decides not to carry it one moment longer. Julia never asked for apologies. She didn't need regret. What she needed was for the truth to be seen and the boundaries to be reset. Not because the past could be rewritten, but because the future deserved protection from the same wound. Because some families aren't toxic because they hate you. They're toxic because they don't know how to love you without controlling, denying, or reshaping who you really are. And in those moments, standing up isn't betrayal. It's survival. Have you ever had to stay silent just to keep the peace? in your own family? Have you ever been made the problem simply for telling the truth? Share your story in the comments below, because your courage today might be the strength someone else needs to finally stop suffering in silence. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, subscribe to Family Drama so you won't miss a single real-life moment that cuts deep and hits home. Because truth, even when it hurts, is still the most powerful way to heal. Thanks for listening. See you next time.